The school had always felt like a place of routine, a place where the days bled into each other, predictable and safe. The bell would ring, students would shuffle between classes, and teachers would deliver their lessons. It was supposed to be just another Friday in calculus class, with spring break right around the corner. But the day began to slip from the grip of normalcy the moment the loudspeaker crackled to life. It was seventh period. The week had been long, and everyone in Mr. Jensen's class was antsy, eager to head into the weekend. They were gathered around, playing a game on Sporkle.com, answering questions about brand logos when the dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. But this time, it wasn't the usual cheery announcement. "This is not a drill," the dean said, his voice sharp with panic. "All classrooms are to go into lockdown. Immediately. I repeat, this is not a drill. Lock your doors, turn off your lights, and stay away from the windows." Mr. Jensen froze, the smile fading from his face. In that moment, the classroom seemed to hold its breath. The students sat in stunned silence. The air that had been filled with the usual chatter and laughter turned heavy, suffocating. Mr. Jensen rushed to the door, locking it in a flurry of motion, his face pale. He motioned for the students to move quickly, guiding them to the back of the room. They huddled together, barely breathing, as the classroom lights flickered and died. No one spoke. No one moved. Then came the footsteps. At first it was a distant pounding, heavy and rapid, but soon it was much closer, much more menacing. The echo of boots striking the linoleum floor grew louder and louder. The man was coming closer. The sound stopped right outside the door. Everyone's heart seemed to pound in unison, and it felt as if the room itself was holding its breath. And then, the door rattled. A sudden, violent bang echoed through the classroom. The students jumped, their nerves fraying. The noise came again, harder this time. A voice, hoarse and frantic, screamed from the hallway. "Open up! I know you're in there! Open the door!" The students' faces were pale, eyes wide in terror. One of the girls began to sob, the sound breaking the silence like a knife. A few others whispered prayers, their hands shaking as they huddled closer. Mr. Jensen's voice was a quiet command. "Stay down. Stay quiet." Another crash. The door shook on its hinges. And then, the voice again, but this time filled with rage, the words trembling with madness. "I'll kill all of you. I'll make you pay." The students could feel the heat of the man's breath through the door. The faintest shuffle of movement from the other side made their skin crawl. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the banging stopped. Silence. The air felt too thick to breathe. No one dared to move, to make a sound. And then, like a gust of wind through a crack in the window, the man's screams echoed down the hall, fading into the distance. The door remained locked. The students remained still. 10 minutes passed. It felt like an eternity. The loudspeaker crackled back to life. The dean's voice, now less frantic but still trembling, filled the classroom. "All teachers, please resume normal activities. The situation has been contained. Continue to keep doors locked. Do not let any students leave the classroom." Mr. Jensen slowly stood, his face a mask of exhaustion. The room didn't feel safe anymore. There was no comfort in the hum of the lights that flickered back to life. Everyone stayed where they were, not knowing if they could trust the dean's words. The footsteps, the threats. It wasn't over. It couldn't be. A few hours later, news spread. The man had been found, but he wasn't in a place anyone expected. One of the janitors working late that night discovered him, sleeping, curled up in a storage closet near the back of the school. The rumors started immediately, whispers that the man had a gun in his pocket, a 44 Magnum to be exact. They said that the janitor might have done something to wake him up, leaving the closet door ajar. But by the time the police arrived, the man was gone, and no one knew what happened after that. The day ended. The lockdown was lifted, but the fear lingered, creeping beneath the surface. No one spoke of it directly, but everyone felt it. The unease, the tension, the sense that the man hadn't really left at all. The next few hours passed in a blur of confusion and fear. Students in Mr. Jensen's class sat in their seats, staring at the door, waiting for the next shoe to drop. The minutes stretched on endlessly, and no one dared to move or speak. Even the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights above felt alien in the stillness, too normal for the chaos that had just unfolded. Eventually the bell rang, signaling the end of class. But no one moved. The teacher gave them a hollow smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You're all free to go," he said, but his voice held no conviction. "Just remember to stay alert. Stay safe." The students filtered out of the room slowly, glancing over their shoulders as they passed the door, unsure whether to trust the calm that had descended on the school. As I walked down the hallway, the walls seemed to close in on me. The usual bright lights of the school felt dimmer now, casting long, eerie shadows on the floor. I had never noticed how cold the hallway could get, how the floors seemed to creak louder than usual with every step. The air felt thick with something that hadn't been there before. Something watching. I passed a few other students, but their faces mirrored my own. Anxious, confused, afraid. The unsettling tension that had started in the classroom was still hanging in the air. I could hear whispers of rumors spreading like wildfire, stories of the man who had been causing the lockdown, but no one knew anything concrete. No one had answers. I made my way toward the exit, but just before I reached the doors, I heard the faintest sound, a soft scratching at the walls, barely perceptible. I froze. The sound came again, closer this time. Something, or someone, was moving in the hallway. I turned, heart racing, my eyes scanning the dark corners of the school. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but the feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. It felt like something was lurking just beyond my line of sight. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was probably just nerves, the remnants of the fear still clinging to me. But the scratching sound came again, louder now, as if something was crawling against the walls, trying to stay hidden. I stepped back slowly, my hand resting on the door handle, ready to run if I had to. But before I could turn the knob, a voice, low and menacing, drifted out of the darkness. "Stay where you are." I didn't move. My heart stopped in my chest. The voice was different from the man's earlier screams, but it carried the same malice, the same feeling of threat. I turned toward the source of the voice. In the shadows at the far end of the hallway, a figure stood, barely visible against the dim light. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket that seemed to blend into the surroundings. His face was obscured, but I could see his eyes, wide, unblinking, and full of something unnatural. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely a sound. The figure didn't respond. Instead, he stepped closer, his movement unnervingly smooth, like he was gliding over the floor instead of walking. The air grew colder with each step he took. I backed away, heart pounding harder in my chest. "What do you want?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. There was no mistaking the fear in the pit of my stomach. His mouth stretched into a smile that didn't belong. It was too wide, too empty. And then, in a voice that echoed with something ancient, he spoke. "You shouldn't have left the classroom." My blood ran cold. I knew then that this wasn't just some random incident. It wasn't just the man who had been screaming earlier. This, whatever this was something much worse. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The figure vanished, as if he'd never been there. The hallway returned to its usual emptiness, but the chill lingered. I ran for the door, but when I opened it, the familiar sight of the school grounds was gone. Instead, there was nothing. A dark, endless void stretching out before me. The walls of the school had disappeared, leaving only darkness, and I heard it again, the low scratching sound. It was coming closer from all directions now. The walls, the floor, the air itself. Everything seemed to be alive, twisting, closing in. My breath came in sharp gasps as I looked around, trying to find some escape, but the darkness was everywhere. Then I saw him again. The figure, but this time, there were more. Dozens of them, emerging from the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "We told you," one of them whispered, its voice a rasping breath. "You shouldn't have left." I backed away, my legs trembling, my mind screaming at me to wake up, to break free from this nightmare. But there was no escaping the horror that was closing in around me. The last thing I heard before everything went black was the sound of footsteps, echoing from every direction. Steps that had never stopped. Steps that had always been there.